Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Screen Dudes. Thank you, as always, for joining me. And we are launching our first Q&A session of 2025 with the director of The Damned, which was reviewed on the channel recently. Thank you so much for joining me, and welcome to the channel, Thordur Palsson. How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And thank you again for making such a great movie. Like, really, really spectacular.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's nice to hear. Yeah.
I've got a few things I want to ask you. When I finished watching this
Mm,
movie,
mm.
I sort of sat back in my chair and I thought, not since The Thing have I been captivated by the location of a horror movie like this. How important was it for you to shoot in Iceland for this movie?
Well, I'm I'm Icelandic, and so I always wanted to shoot this in Iceland. But there is just something about when you're creating a story and you're working within a certain kind of genre, and this has nothing to do with the theme of the film or what the characters are going through. This is just looking at what sandbox are we playing in, and
Mm.
excuse me. And mostly when you watch certain films, that is people stuck in a place. There's something after them, and they cannot get away. And from the kind of the origins of this story, I was living in a seaside village where we kind of got snowed in, not for the whole winter, but I could kind of feel what it was like to be kind of stuck. I didn't really know anyone. There was no entity after me, thank God. I hadn't done anything bad that I know of, but
No
I could kind
Joker.
of exactly, yeah. But no, I think setting in any movie, if you talk about your favorite films, it's all about the setting. It's all about the mood, and how do you kind of put those things together. So I think Iceland was a character in the film.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Um, And so bringing it back to what I just asked you about The Thing,
Yeah.
how much of horror movies like The Thing or The Shining, which is another one set in this sort of snow-capped environment, and explore similar themes of isolation and, the creeping dread on the mind, how much of films like this influenced your work?
Well, I mean, like we didn't actually like sit down and talk about The Shining or The Thing, but I mean, I've seen those films. I'm not thousands, hundreds of times. Like I've probably seen The Shining more than The Thing, but I could probably tell you beat for beat what happens. And when you're talking about the deterioration of your protagonist's mind, and you're talking about The Shining, or your well, depending on how you look at The Shining, what the house is doing to him,
Right.
or the thing where you're talking about paranoia. What makes the thing so interesting is the paranoia. Is people turning on one another. It is a friend becomes foe, and so you're kind of working with these elements, um, and but to be thinking like Carpenter and it's always dangerous to think too much about these fantastic films because you can never really live up to them. So it's so yeah. It to answer your question, it's definitely I've seen those films a lot of times, but it wasn't really we didn't really talk about references until quite late in the game, until we suddenly had to have visuals to go with it, and references of sometimes when people need to, well, I'll say it, when money people need to take, so what, this is kind of like this meets that, what are we talking, and then suddenly you're like, oh, you have to kind of help people along with
Yeah.
understanding what it might feel like.
Yeah, the elevator pitch. It's like The Thing meets blah blah, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Now the thing I loved also about this horror movie is that traditionally in this genre, the role of the female is usually one that's kind of sexualized or is there to be, ripped apart, torn for gore or whatever.
Yes.
That's so not what you did here with Odessa, and I love that. The fact that you chose to make Odessa's character the lead in a hyper masculine surrounding is a huge testament to your abilities that you pulled it off. Now, how proud are you of what you've contributed to the horror genre, and how do you see it moving forward with regards to women's roles in the genre?
It's interesting. I don't know if it's because I was raised by a single mother, but both my TV show that I did before, the lead of that was a woman. I mean, or a female character. I mean, it is a dual TV show with two, but she is the lead. And then this film, the lead is a female character, and then my next project, the lead is a woman again. So it's very interesting. It's not. I don't even think about it. It's just so maybe that's something in the way I was raised, the way that maybe the people and the characters I know from my life, and because when you're doing a genre project, you have to feed in your own life experiences. And maybe I just, being raised by a single mother, I have difficulties creating these male characters. I don't know. But it is interesting. Because you also touched upon within this genre and what the films that have been made before, and I am always very drawn to strong female characters because, again, sorry to say, like, my mom is a very strong female character, and my girlfriend also. So that's just something that I'm drawn to and I think is interesting. And to be thrown into this, very masculine world that is, Iceland, 1871, in the middle of nowhere. And it's interesting to kind of watch a character try and juggle all of these things, the gender element of it, the having to be a boss, where she was thrown into this kind of position of, because her husband died. It was his fishing station, really. So she has all of these things as she's trying to juggle it, but also keeping that mask on of she can't show the vulnerability. So sometimes when you have that mask up and you're trying to be strong, you might make decisions that you possibly might not have made if you were not trying to, pretend to be strong for the group. So I kind of went off course from your question, but these are kind of the things that kind of interest me about a female character in such a masculine world.
Yeah, no, I love that. And there's one, so when you talk about all this, there's one scene in The Damned in particular that jumps to mind. It's that scene when they're in the hut and everyone's yelling at each other. And you could have done this mad thing where you're sweeping around with all sorts of cameras or doing a one shot, but you just focused on her and the rest became ambient noise. And I thought that was a stroke of genius. It's like, no, yes, there are very important characters around her, but this is her and her inner turmoil and how she's dealing with this. And it was almost like this duality of her kind of trying to block out the noise while keeping on this mask, as you said, but also being very vulnerable within herself of, oh, we're in trouble here. That is brilliant. I loved what you did with that scene, man.
Oh, thank you. No, that was kind of the from writing the script. Jamie Hannigan, a fantastic Irish writer, wrote the script, and from the beginning, it was always Eva's story and how Eva perceives the world, and then that kind of goes into the scenes, and we were always trying to figure out, how is she seeing things, how is she looking at these things, how is the turmoil around her affecting her, or is it not? And then when I started working with my cinematographer, Eli Aronson, that again, where do we place the camera? What are we focusing on? Because I could do single shot of all these characters shouting, and everyone gets their moment. But what's really the scene about? And it's about how Eva is perceiving this moment, and how is she gonna rise up, excuse me, and take control. And she did. And then you can kind of, argue about possibly the some of the decisions made, but she is definitely trying to do it for the men, for the greater good.
100%, definitely for the greater good. And speaking of the characters in this movie, I want to talk a bit about the casting process now, because for The Damned, how adamant were you that you needed to get Odessa and Joe Cole, who, by the way, have you seen A Prayer Before Dawn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, Jesus, he was good in that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. How important was it for you to get Odessa and Joe Cole for the roles, and what was the casting process bringing them on board like?
I've always loved Australian actors. I don't know what it is. Odessa is Australian, and there is just something about Australians and Irish people being an Icelander. I don't know what it is. There's just some kind of thing that I connect with. Maybe they hate Icelanders. Maybe it's not, but I love Australians and Irish people. And I'm trying to think, had I seen possibly Assassination Nation and Shirley, and I thought there was such different performances. And then her name, this was before, and then her name came up, and then it's all about, having a cup of coffee, doing a Zoom, and obviously sending them the script, and then just seeing how are you seeing this, and just kind of initial chats, and to get her on board. And then obviously she's been in The Staircase, The Stand, and other films I'm forgetting now, Mothering Sunday.
Yeah,
she is like, I don't think there's a lot of actresses also like her age. She's quite, young.
Yeah.
That have that body of work, and it's so varied. It's like none of these characters, like look at Mothering Sunday, look at Assassination Nation, and look at Shirley. Like you wouldn't think this is the same person. It's so crazy. And I think you don't really get that. Really, there's very, very few actresses. So I was very drawn to her, and she's very talented. Joe Cole randomly had stayed in my apartment when I was in film school.
No way.
Yeah. So when I went to film school in the UK, and he did a short film with my classmate. So I had kind of met him while they were rehearsing, and I can't remember if he stayed on our sofa or how that went, but he was definitely there. So I met him a couple of times there. So when I met him for a cup of coffee, I was like, do you remember when you stayed on my sofa? Like, I don't know how many years ago. So that was nice.
Did he remember?
He was like, oh yeah. It's like, yeah. So that was really nice, kind of having a sense of the person, because then I'd obviously seen, Green Room, Prayer Before Dawn, Peaky Blinders, Gangs of London, and I'm trying to remember other things also. And again, he has this really interesting kind of stoic kind of masculinity to him, where you kind of just, if I was in a bind and we were like, I would follow him. He feels like a kind of a stoic, kind of good man to have on your side when everything is going tits up. That kind of feeling, outside of being a fantastic actor, but just it's that aura that you're meeting people. I'm not a big believer of getting a performance out of an actor. I think it's all casting.
Interesting.
It's all casting, 90%. And I believe a director is just there to help them, just a little bit to the right, just a little bit to the left. And I'm not talking the frame. It's just, where are you coming from? Where are you going as a character? And just sometimes you just got to remind them, oh, just remember, this is just what happened. You don't need to say so this is what we're doing. Oh, it's like that's not how I look at it. It's just often reminding them of certain elements from the script, certain things we'd already spoken about, and where they coming from. But again, if you do the casting right, which I felt very blessed with all of the actors, that I was never telling them like act it like this, so.
You have to say, with the casting, I know he didn't have such a big role as Joe and Odessa, but the fact that you got freaking Sandor Clegane from Game of Thrones, I was like, hey, right it home there, nice.
I mean, it's just you meet these people and you just somehow you get them on board, and they're like, yeah, I'd love to go to Iceland. Okay, yeah. But he has a great connection to Iceland. He has obviously, I don't know if his shoots in Game of Thrones were in Iceland, but he'd already made a film in Iceland like 15 years before that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which was Beowulf. He did like a small indie Beowulf film, and so he had a great connection. So him coming back to Iceland was like, not coming back home, but he really, really enjoyed that. But again, we talk about, I never told Rory like act him like this. It's just, you are this character. You are the epitome of what a man is, like every man wants to be like Rory, and that's just how it is. So again, just very, very lucky in many ways that people wanted to go on this journey and stay in the middle of nowhere for 6 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned, I mean, I knew this from your previous work. So the transition from TV to film, it's radically different, obviously. Yeah. Can you describe how your creative process shifted from one to the next, the changes you had to make, and some things that you maybe had to do differently for film versus TV?
Well, it might be different for me than others, but so the TV show I created it. So I was shepherding that project from beginning to end. So I had created it, I developed it, I worked with the screenwriters, we brought in 2 other directors, so I had to work with those directors. I directed 4 out of the 8 episodes of the Valhalla Murders. So I wasn't like a director for hire. I can imagine if you've only been a director for hire on TV shows, when you're coming in and you're trying to kind of figure out what are we doing, what meeting the showrunner and trying to interpret, trying to figure out what do they want. Where I was, from my end, I was the creator, so it was possibly the step was easier for me than possibly director for hires and for hire in TV. But I would say the most difficult thing is the change in genres. So I was doing a Nordic noir set in present day, going from that to a psychological horror film set in 1871.
Yeah, period piece. Yeah.
So yeah, that is a pivot that was difficult, and then you had in psychological horror, creating a mood or an ambiance is very important, versus not as important in TV. Of course, there's always, but for this kind of a piece, it's very important that all the things are singing together. Obviously the script, the performances, but then we go into the music, the sound, the cinematography. These things are creating suddenly a mood in the piece that is difficult, and to try and verbalize the mood that you want to somehow get. It's like, I guess, cooking. You're just a little bit more salt, a little bit more pepper, just these things, and you're just trying to figure out what is that line that you're trying to hit. So I'd say that the difficulty was not so much in the doing, really. It was in me figuring out how to verbalize, and I hate this, my vision, which is always very difficult. So people make you write a lot of things down to, like, write your vision down, explain it, and it's like, okay, but it does help, but it's difficult to verbalize until suddenly it's all put together and people can see it and feel it.
Sure. Well, I want to talk to you then about, because that leads nicely into the next question. So some of the things you've mentioned, like sound, cinematography, I want to talk specifically about the techniques for making a movie like this. The cinematography, the camera work. So what's the methodology for creating that sense of dread, that feeling of isolation, and how thought out does each shot need to be able to achieve that effect?
Well, I am a big believer in a lot of prep. So I don't show up and wing it. I've never done that. I believe in, prep your ass off, and then if your actors or the circumstances are changing as you're making it, be ready to pivot, but always have in your back pocket that prep. We did a lot of storyboarding for this, which I'd never done before, which I initially had hated. I didn't really connect with storyboarding. And then making this film, I started to fall in love with it, and I figured out, it's as important to find the right storyboard artist. So I as the right cinematographer. So the storyboard artist I met here in Iceland, he was just a fantastic person. So it was actually nice spending days with him storyboarding. So we did that. So that is obviously part of the prep. And then watching loads of films with your cinematographer, talking about it could be, we looked, I was showing him things from There Will Be Blood, and that
Nice.
what Paul Thomas Anderson did in certain scenes, obviously not the same kind of film, but period, the techniques he wanted to use in that film were very classical, very much a throwback in the way the camera moved, but also he doubled down a lot. Certain scenes are just one shot. What do we need more? It's a nice push in or a pull back. And those things just kind of feed into the vocabulary that you and your DP have. Let's double down on this one. Really? Yeah. No coverage. Oh, okay. And then you start talking and thinking, and then other film, we watched The Piano together, and suddenly we started to throw in these very beautiful wides. Like if you look at The Piano, some of those wides are just like beautiful. So suddenly that feeds into it. Some of the psychological nature of The Others with Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, nice. So
it's just little things. Jacob's Ladder came in there a little bit. So it is that of when you're making something that is I don't want to say it's like mathematical, but like when you're working in genre and there's a build up and a release within a scene or a sequence or whatever it is, you need to have the right elements of certain things to be able to construct that for the release to work.
Yeah.
And when you're winging it, you might end up in the edit with not enough material, and thus the interesting element of figuring it out in the edit.
Interesting.
Which I don't believe in.
I support that completely. Absolute number. We'll fix it in post. No. I completely agree with that.
I mean, okay, I don't know. No.
No. But what was the most challenging part of this production, and how did you overcome it?
Snow.
Simple as.
Snow. No, and there's loads of stories. Like we need snow. We lost the snow. Of course, we go to the 𝒃𝒐𝒍𝒗𝒆𝒄 where you're guaranteed snow, and like 4 days into it or 3 days, we lost the snow. So we had to shoot all our interior scenes, and we just start taking them away. You know, each scene, and then we're just getting closer to the end of our interior scenes, and then we're just praying to God that he'll give us a little bit more snow. And I'm even talking to my grandma. You know, she's got a better connection to the guy up there than I do. And then with like a couple of days left in the interior scenes, it started to snow and snow and snow, and we got more snow the latter part of the shoot than the beginning.
Right.
So that was. Weather is always difficult when it's written in the script that you need certain weather, and you're not doing a huge budget thing where you can just put the money hose on it. We didn't have a money hose.
Yeah. How many days was the shooting? Like what was the time constraint you had to work with?
It was 6 weeks, and that was tight for a film that logistically was kind of difficult on this budget. You know, we had snow,
and weather dependent, right? Yeah,
weather dependent. We had to shoot on the water. We had to do, you know, figure out how to do certain things that were supposed to be on the water, but actually in a swimming pool. But on an indie budget, we built the exterior of the house in that place, but we also built the interior in an old fishnet factory. So you have these very, you know, these kind of ideas of how you want to make the film, but your budget often doesn't kind of see it the same way. So you got to figure out a way to do it the way you want to do it with the control that you want. So yeah, I guess that is what was, but I'd say all in all, the snow is the most difficult part of it.
Okay, last two very quick questions. Since we're on the genre of horror, can you give me your, I don't know, your Mount Rushmore of horror movies?
Mount Rushmore of horror movies. Oof. It's a very difficult question.
Very difficult question.
I'm also trying not to be like boring with my answer. It's like,
just so you know, this is the one question I have that recurs on every single Q&A I do, and it's always great to see people's reactions, because the one thing that you all have in common is you all say, "That's hard." Yeah, and it's usually, what I love about it is that you're not prepped for it, so you kind of have to answer the first thing that comes to mind, and there's a certain beauty in that organicness.
The first thing that came to mind, which is a boring answer, is The Shining, but it's just so boring. If I was watching this, I'd be like, oh, that's such a boring answer. So I'm actually trying to think, what recently have I seen that kind of, you know what new film that inspires me is Hereditary. Inspired me a lot.
A lot of people say that, yeah,
and because. The first two acts are so interesting with the family, and I understand why he had to go bonkers in the third act. I understand it all. And he does.
Yeah.
But I thought like the first two acts of that are phenomenal. And Midsommar is or Midsommar, however you want to say it, it is also. I think that one is more visually like those. He does so many long takes in that film, and like wide ones, wide, like well, there's so many things happening in the frame. If he did that on the day or he added in post, who cares? But it's a feast. So I think whenever you're watching these things and you can feel a filmmaker through the story, that really kind of turns me on with that. And also, you know, I love The Lighthouse, which is but it's sold as a horror, but it's not a horror. It's a comedy. You know, it's like so. but that, that visually, wow, it's but also the performances, two guys stuck in a place. So yeah, but Mount Rushmore, boring answer, man, but it's the first thing that came to mind is The Shining.
So you've got The Shining, Hereditary, Midsommar. You've got room for one more.
You know what? Just kind of rattling off kind of films that I've. Can I find like someone that's a little bit not famous? Oh,
think international. Maybe there's like some sort of Asian or African horror movie that no one's heard of. I'd love you to bring that to the table if you know one.
A horror film. So you know what happened? You just go blank.
Yeah, of course.
Once you say goodbye, I'm like, no. I was trying to think like Scandinavian. I mean, the Vanishing. I don't know if you've seen.
Yeah. Great shout.
But it's interesting. I saw the American version with Kiefer Sutherland and Jeff Bridges first, which it's a remake, and the director directed the remake, and he gave it a happy ending, which I love.
Yeah.
But then someone told me, that's a remake, and I watched it's Dutch, right? I think it's Dutch. And I think that is really interesting in tone. Talk about tone. And is this funny? I don't know. This is weird. I don't know how to feel. And just structure also. It breaks kind of structural rules, really. How you make a film, really. But because you have a character that needs an answer to a question, and that pulls you through the whole film, then who cares what the structural rules are if that need is strong enough.
Last question then, Thordur. What is can you tell us a bit about your next project? Give us some insight into it and when we can expect to see it.
I'm working on a couple of things. I'm working on a project now with the same producers and writer, Emily, Camilla, and Jamie, the writer. And I can't really say. I mean, it's like until you have financing, it's like you're just kind of, talking out of your ass, really.
Sure.
But that's something, I loved working with them, and I can't wait to work with them again, and hopefully people like this film enough that they say, hey, let's make the next thing with them, So
this film has resonated with people. It's certainly resonated with me. I think it's a real hidden gem of a horror movie that I've encouraged people on the channel to go and see. The Damned is available now to stream. It's absolutely one you guys need to check out. Thordur Palsson, thank you so much for joining me here today on the Silver Screen Dudes. And I really look forward to what your next project is. I'm a major fan now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll come back when we have the next one, and we can see if it's shit or not.
It won't be. I really appreciate it, man. And guys, as always, if you're new to the channel and movies are your jam and you're a believer in supporting independent cinema, this is the channel for you, the Silver Screen Dudes. Hit the subscribe button, give the video a like. And Thordur, where can people find you if they want to follow you online?
I'm on Instagram, just my name on Instagram. Yeah, they can just kind of see. I don't really post a lot, but sometimes I do post a couple of filmmaker things.
I have a feeling your followers are about to start skyrocketing, my friend. Love it. Thordur, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.